There's a new report out from CGLA Infrastructure, the Strategic 100 North American Infrastructure Report, Building Prosperity. And it's talking a lot about projects and building roads and bridges and how tech is going to affect the building and I guess the success of these projects moving forward. Joining us on POTUS is Norm Anderson, President, CEO of CGLA Infrastructure. The Twitter handle is just the same thing, at CGLA_INFRA. Norm Anderson, welcome back.
Hey, good morning.
So tell us what the report was intended to look at and what we should take from it.
Well, the big thing is to look at the top 100 projects and what it really involves in terms of investment, $376 billion. You know, we just failed once again to pass a transportation bill, and it simply tells us that the repressed demand, the backed up demand is just increasing pretty dramatically for us.
Yeah, this is obviously, I think people, aside from potholes and so on, what they don't see is sometimes more dangerous. You see a lot of bridges now being closed temporarily at the very least, and some temporary fixes being put on this. So clearly some political action is necessary on this. I think that one of the projects you talk about, the Gateway, which is a tunnel between New York and New Jersey, I can't remember. Is that the one that Governor Christie had stopped?
Yeah, well, that's the idea is that you've got, especially after Hurricane Sandy, you've got to build a third tunnel, a modern tunnel. I mean, those tunnels are unbelievably old now. They're damaged because of salt damage, and so
you talk about the Lincoln and the Holland Tunnel.
Yeah, one of those things goes down, and forget the relationship between New York and New Jersey. It's pretty amazing.
A lot of people have suggested they need to have tunnels throughout Manhattan underneath the city because it would make it easier for people to get in and around. But we'll leave that for another time. So what role is technology playing in this? I saw something about 3D printers, and I imagine, well, we're not going to print highways or bridges, I would guess, but I guess they can play a role in this.
Well, actually, it's fascinating. I mean, there is a YouTube where in Holland they printed a metal 3D bridge right as you watch the printer print it away. So there's a lot going on that's even hard to imagine. But think about driverless vehicles in cities. I'm looking outside my window right now, and I've got 3 lanes outside, and 2 of them are completely blocked by vehicles, by trucks. So driverless vehicles, you have 3 lanes that are free. 3D printers, what's going on with that is that a lot of job sites now don't have inventory. They simply print up the replacement parts that they need. So it changes the way you think about what you do, and it changes how the kind of materials you can use, and it changes how your level of creativity as well.
We just discussed or mentioned New York, but obviously this goes around the country. You've got projects in New England, the Mid-Atlantic, the South and Southeast, the Midwest with 5 projects. You've got Canada with 12 projects that made your list, and I wonder how Canada figures into U.S. infrastructure needs.
Well, we're huge fans of Canada. One of the things the Canadians have done so well is figured out how to get their pension funds investing in their infrastructure projects. So we spend a tremendous amount of time trying to figure out, this sort of painful, should we raise the gasoline tax since 1992? And the Canadians have figured out how to get their pension funds investing in highways and bridges, and especially transit projects. The other thing in the report you'll see is that the demand for transit, moving people around cities, is a lot higher than it is for highways. So you've got a real change in terms. I mean, my kids, 28 and 26, don't have cars and don't want cars. So we, I guess our generation equated cars with freedom, and they don't exactly. They equate it with debt.
That's a fascinating generational and demographic story to be told, because 100 years ago, or 110 years ago, let's put it that way, there was very little in this country in terms of automobiles, and 100 years later, certain generations look at it. It was what built America. I mean, let's face it, in the 1940s and 50s, automobiles really came into the fore, and people really started owning those, and were manufacturers all over the place. It sort of stood in a way for America, and now we're kind of getting away from that, and I wonder if we are seeing in the generational shift more of an approval of the kinds of mass transit projects that you're talking about.
Well, I think you really are, and also the country is much more urbanized than it was in the 50s, right? So, those fantastic movies of you driving in a convertible and the air's down and you can go wherever you want to go. Well, everybody lives in cities now, and they're trying to figure out how to live better. I think one of our arguments is that technology allows you to do that in so many different ways, and it's simply going to change the way we think about infrastructure in our cities going forward.
Norm, this is all wonderful. We all wonder about how great things can be, and of course, just want to, at the very least, be safe with our bridges, our tunnels, our roads.
Yeah.
But one wonders what is going to be the impetus for Congress to be able to move on this, at least to have a highway. I mean, even Republicans, even more conservative Republicans, I do think, realize that you have to have something in there from the federal government to make these projects take place.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, and, that you've got to have not only something in there from the federal government, you've got to have a lot more leadership on the federal government side. So, it used to be 80% of highways and bridges were funded by the federal government. Now it's down to 30% and 70% from the states. And so we need to rethink how we fund our infrastructure and what the priorities are. And, one of the things that I see is that there's so much confusion. You're talking about assets that have to be useful for 30 or 40 years. Tremendous amount of confusion in terms of what those assets are going to look like, what you need going forward. And I think that's what has everybody slowed down. I think people simply don't see that we need a huge amount of money to build more highways. And there's a little bit of a food fight between the transit guys and the highway guys in terms of who would get what money and how you pay for it, and who's involved in paying. We've talked about this before too. Part of it is, does the public fund really need to pay for infrastructure, or can you bring in more private investment? And how would you do that using technology to maybe crowdsource ideas and also crowdsource investment in projects?
So we need to have this as part of the 2016 presidential debate. It's pretty clear right now. Norm?
Well, we're actually putting that together. So we have something called Blueprint 2025, where we're putting 100 CEOs together to define a blueprint for the next administration, because you just can't get this done from a standing start on January 20th, 2017.
Norm Anderson, always great to have you on board. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
You too. Norm Anderson, President, CEO of CGLA Infrastructure, joining us this morning to talk about their new report, which identifies tech as the tipping point for infrastructure. We will link that on our Facebook page, facebook.com/POTUS Politics. And the Twitter handle for Norm is @CGLA_INFRA.